20th, 1980. When were you born?
I was born December the 24th, 1909, at 2100 Lake Avenue. That's right by Lake Montebello. I was born in the upper rear room.
Do you know the name of your doctor?
I was named after my doctor. His name was Dr. Walter White. And my mother liked him a lot and named me after him. And he was still living. Oh, probably some 28 years later when I had to get a certificate of birth from him.
Where do you get the name Gilson?
Well, my full name is Walter Gilson Councilman. You spell it Giltzan. And the middle name is named after my godfather, John Gilson, who lived at 2100 Lake Avenue and with whom my father and mother were living at the time I was born.
Have any brothers or sisters?
No, I'm an only child. My mother had been married before, and there was a little girl who died when she was about 2 years old, Ethel, and she's buried in Baltimore Cemetery on North Avenue. But my father was Carvel Bamberger Councilman, and my grandmother was Emma Bamberger Councilman. My mother was the daughter of Elizabeth Slate, and her name was Elizabeth. No, I'm sorry, it was Anna Slate. My great-grandfather was, or my grandfather rather, was John Carvel Councilman. And of course, you already have a chart of the family history, so it's useless to go into the entire history of everybody. So, my father was a very good-looking man, and he liked to race motorcycles and hill climb with him. And I have a picture of myself on a motorcycle that belonged to him, an old Indian. Oh, I didn't have any hobbies at all. The only thing I could think of, my hobby was eating, I guess. But I didn't have any real hobbies that I can remember at all.
Where did you live?
Oh, I lived for a couple of years at 2100 Lake Avenue, but then my mother died when I was about 2 years old. So we moved over to a place which is right by the Herring Run Bridge over Harford Road. It's what's now known as Hall Springs. And from there we moved out to Belair Road near White Avenue. And I went to school at first 3 grades at Preston and Central Avenue. Then later on I went to the Gordonville School. And I remember that the World War ended while I was there in the 4th grade.
Best memories in childhood?
Well, I don't know what you call best memories. After, for a while, we went to live with my Aunt Sadie and her family. And, of course, I was kind of the third man out there. So it wasn't too enjoyable a stay at that time. But this was during the First World War, and then we moved away from there. My cousin Emma and my cousin Robert lived there also. Thomas Monroe and Sarah Monroe. I had an uncle. And my father married a lady named Pearl Bailey, and she became my stepmother. He was a manager of the Grand Theater at the time. I became the manager, and we moved to 3003 Clearview Avenue, which is in Parkville.
How would you describe the transportation at that time?
Transportation at that time really consisted of streetcars. And we rode the streetcars practically entirely. We didn't have a multitude of cars that you see around these days, but my father did have some old cars, and he had a Colt 8 and a big old California top Studebaker and a Buick, and As a matter of fact, he had a Maxwell, which was the ancestor of the Chrysler, of the Plymouth. I don't know which, one of the two. And we enjoyed going around. We used to take short trips to Gettysburg and Keymore and Tawnytown, Washington, and places like that.
This school, and what was school like?
Well, generally, we had to walk to school. We didn't have transportation, and I wasn't very far away from the Gordonville school, that's for sure, but I had to take the streetcar to go down to the one at Preston Street. But mostly we walked until I got into City College, which was the high school at that time, and of course I had to take the streetcar to get there. That was quite a long ride. Matter of fact, we moved from my aunt's place to Hollandtown, 3405 Bank Street. My father was managing the Grand Theater on what's now Conklin Street. And I went to school 47, and then he moved out to 3003 Clearview Avenue. And I had to go all the way from Clearview Avenue in Parkville down to school 47 in Hollandtown.
Grandparents like?
Well, my grandmother was Emma Bamberger Councilman, and her mother was a Stansbury. But she was a rather strong woman so far as willpower was concerned. My grandfather I never knew. He died sometime around when my father was born, so obviously I didn't know him. My grandmother was Anna Slight. She was originally from Salem, so her husband died when he was quite young, but I've never been able to trace him down. So, Nan was a very nice person, and she did quite a bit for her youngest son, whom she treated more or less as a favorite. And she had three brothers, Lee and Will, and a sister, Sarah, married Thomas Monroe.
For recreation.
We did our homework for recreation. We didn't seek recreation out like the kids do now. We would spin tops or throw cards up against the wall, see which one came closest. And we just didn't have this desire for recreation, if you want to call it that, and to be constantly immersed in it like we do now. We just had simple games, as I indicated, maybe spinning tops or something like that, or running, or playing catch, or things of that nature. It wasn't too complicated, I'm afraid. We used to go on excursion trips down the bay. We used to go swimming in the bay at Polchester. The excursion boat was at Dreamland, which went down to Chesapeake Beach, and the other one was at Polchester. The Louise, which went down to Polchester. But once we went down to Ocean City, but that's the only time that I can recall ever having gone to Ocean City. Well, my remembrance of it is vague, but there wasn't any inlet at that time, so all there was a little dumpy town, really. It wasn't like it is now. Just a few hotels, and that was it. Some amusements. There was a very short boardwalk, which was not too far from the ocean. It was there, but there wasn't any inlet to it, as I say. It was created by the Great Hurricane of 1933. And when I went down there first, it was just landlocked in a Tucson Bay.
After high school?
Well, I had to get a job, obviously. My father, unhappily, had lost his job at the theater, and when I got a job with a faultless manufacturing company that made nightwear. And from there I went to work for Montgomery Ward's, heaven forbid. I was a service auditor to check the rebars books. And I went to work for the Firestone Tire and Rubber Company in one of their stores. And after that I went... No. I handled tires for the customers. Bought them out and gave them to them when they bought them. And then I went... Huh?
You didn't put them on?
No, I didn't have. That wasn't my job. I was the inventory clerk. So I went from the Firestone Tire and Rubber Company and got a job at the cab company because this was a Great Depression and nobody could get a job. So I worked there a couple of years. Went to work at Bethlehem Steel as an inspector of steel plates. From there I went to work for the government at the post office and transferred from the post office to the Internal Revenue Service, and that's where I stayed till I retired.
Did you meet Grandmom?
Well, I met Grandma while I was driving a cab. And I first met her sister, and she introduced me to her. And of course, she thought I'd stay a cab driver the rest of her life, my life, poor soul. So she wasn't too enthused. So I met Grandma at, I think it's 3015 Glenmore Avenue, and she lived with people named Ziegfeld. The old lady's still living. She's about 90 years old now. But I dated her, and the first date we had, we went out to the old Major Harry Gilmore place, Glen Helen, out on Delaney Valley Road. And things went from bad to worse, so I finally asked her to marry me. We got married in 1937 when we took a honeymoon trip up to Niagara Falls and Canada and Thousand Islands.
Was it a big wedding?
No, we were just married to my father and my aunt were the only ones there that I can recall. In fact, I'm sure they would have. We were married at the Northumberland, I think, Presbyterian Church at North Avenue and St. Paul Street. I don't even remember it. Well, I was in the National Guard and went in there in 1927, and I stayed in there until about 1938, at which point I became a reserve officer and worked up till first lieutenant. But when the war came along, they gave us the opportunity of resigning, and I had to because of Elizabeth's health and the fact that she had 2 children. So I never really got into the regular army.
What was the name of the 2 children?
Name of what?
The name of the 2 children that you had.
Well, one was Alma Ray Councilman, who has 4 children of her own, Alma Ray Murphy, and the other girl was Loretta Lane Councilman.
What did you think when you were told about the birth of the first child?
Well, of course, at the time I was out of work unhappily, and she was born at the Sinai Hospital, and we were a little bit worried. And we think that they threw her down the laundry chute because she was all scarred up. It took some time for her to recoup. But fortunately, she came out of it. She's really a rather strong girl. And my daughter Loretta was born at the West Baltimore General Hospital, which is now the Lutheran Hospital, during a thunderstorm.
What do you think your memories are of the children?
Well, I remember them living in Normal Avenue, 1732. I have some pictures of them, of course, but...
Your personal feelings.
Well, I love both of them, but took them on all the trips with us. And of course, we added another little girl. Her name was Ellen Ruth, and we have a picture of all 3 of them together. So this particular little girl was kind of a scamp, you know. She was always getting into trouble and always kind of contentious, but we loved her. And she finally grew up to be a very fine young lady and had 3 boys of her own.
The Great Depression.
Well, you really couldn't get a job anywhere. You couldn't buy a job. In Dundalk, for example, all the stores but the food store were closed up completely. The steel mills were down entirely. They weren't producing any steel. Things were pretty bad. They didn't have any unemployment insurance like you do now. But fortunately, they did put unemployment insurance in 1937 and also Social Security, so that was a tremendous boost to people who had gotten out of work, but now it's being used as a racket, unhappily, by many people.
Oh, wait, I'm curious. See, I have a question for this. Can I ask you?
Great Depression was caused by a natural cycle in the economy. They overbought and overspent. And of course, it always happens after a great war that you have a great boom, and then suddenly people stop buying and everything goes flat. At this particular time, the stock market went completely broke and millionaires lost all their millions overnight for committing suicide and everything else.
What do you believe? No, this isn't a question. I just wanted to ask you, do you believe it will continue?
Do I believe what will continue?
Do you believe that it's inevitable that
Oh, yeah, it was inevitable. People being what they are, the stock market, of course, goes by the feelings of the people and responds to it. And people get scared. They start selling their stocks because they have to eat first. And stocks became worthless. Places like Black & Decker, for instance, almost went bankrupt. Were in the hands of the banks for quite a long while. But the answer is that the big boys came out of it fairly well. The really big boys, as they always do.
Did you most enjoy?
Sleeping. But I can't think of any high marks except when I married Elizabeth and had the children. But we did go on trips like to Canada, and we went to Florida a couple times, and things of this nature. Our tastes were relatively simple. We didn't
Did you like the trip?
expect too much.
Did you like the trip to Canada? What did you like?
Yeah, we enjoyed the trip to Canada. Of course, Niagara Falls is something that everybody likes to look at. Then we went through Toronto and over to the Thousand Islands, which is quite interesting in itself. Came back through the Adirondacks, which was much more beautiful at that time than it is now. It wasn't so crowded. Then we came back down past West Point in New York City, but that wasn't a particularly enjoyable section. We always liked to move around a little bit, but we never engaged in any extensive trips or any real high points. We didn't have the money for it.
Yeah, what did you like about Florida?
Well, we liked the different atmosphere, the palm trees and the wide beaches and the different types of fauna and flora that were down there. And of course, we went to Silver Spring, which was the headquarters of Ocala, Seminole Indian chief. We liked that. And we came back through the Great Smokies and enjoyed that, except that Grandmom got a kink in her neck and had a terrible time for a while till she unraveled it. But fortunately she did, and we came on home.
Other education beyond high school?
Yes, I have 2 years of college, and I have a title, Associate in Business Administration in accounting. Of course, this has been my field of endeavor, accounting, and that's how I got the job with the Internal Revenue Service and became an Internal Revenue agent and moved up to the top grade and then retired.
Accounting degree?
University of Baltimore in 1938, I think it was. Grandma was there in attendance, of course. Well, we just rode around the local area, that's about all.
Right around in the car, maybe.
Yeah, after we were married, we took a trip down to Norfolk on the old Bay Line. That was rather enjoyable. Grandma got scared because a storm came up and the old boat was rocking and the thunder and lightning were quite extensive. But then coming back, it was a beautiful moonlight trip. So we had a rather nice time overall. We went down to Virginia Beach, for one thing. Well, we moved. First of all, when we got married, we lived at 25th Street, the 500 block, in an apartment. And then I was working at Bethlehem Steel, and we moved down to 20th Street. From 20th Street, we moved over to Normal Avenue, 1732. from Normal Avenue, we had a house in Towson at 242 Ridge Avenue. But I was transferred to Dundalk, and we decided to move to Gray Manor, 2505 McComas Avenue. But it wasn't too nice an area, and we moved over into Dundalk at 5 Playfield Street. And from there, we bought the farm.
Did you tell us about the purchase of the farm?
Well, we bought the farm for a very reasonable price. We saw it in the paper, and we spoke to the real estate agent, and there was an old lady named Flory, and apparently they'd been using it as sucker bait for people for years because of the lack of road frontage. They'd get a down payment and then seize the down payment when the banks wouldn't finance it. But we had a friend named John White who guaranteed the loan, and we got a loan from the Baltimore Federal Savings and Loan and bought it, and it was a big hassle. We thought we'd rob them, which we did. But anyhow, we got the farm.
What do you mean, big hassle?
Well, she wanted to back out of it. And the old man told us that we'd robbed them and all this kind of stuff.
Why? Did you pay the asking price?
Yeah, we paid the asking price, but they
What
still,
was the asking price?
$9,000.
And you paid it.
Well,
Then
we
why would
paid.
that be there?
Well, they still felt like we'd robbed them, and they were constantly up here trying to get us to back out on it, and we wouldn't do it, so.
You got grandchildren.
Well, of course, I love my grandchildren, but they are quite a hassle when they're being born. They scare everybody, you know. Your mother was quite ill with Brian and also with Kirk. I don't know what happened with you, Matthew, but anyhow, everything straightened itself out. And same way with Alma. Little Michael was born in the military hospital at Andrews Air Force Base, and I'm not sure where little Patrick was born. Patrick Walter. I'm not sure. Oh yeah, little Angus was born where he lives now. But Noni was born in Spain. And of course, your two cousins, Elizabeth and Tara, they were born on the Army base down in Texas or somewhere down there. I'm not absolutely certain just where. And Sherry was born here in Baltimore, of course, at the Union Memorial Hospital. Well, I was glad to see them, but I had the same general emotions with regard to all of them. I don't know that I had any particular outstanding emotions about it. I remember walking up and down with Alfred when Brian was born. He was very worried, and we stuck it out till the event took place, and things worked out fine. We have him before us now. He's overcome many of his early failure to eat and so forth. Turned out to be quite a big guy.
And what do you want to accomplish?
Well, of course, I'm retired, but I'm the secretary of our congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, and that keeps us quite busy. My sole aim and purpose in life right now is to serve Jehovah.
To the interview between Matt Bryson and Walter Councilman, my grandfather. Reporting to you over and out. Adios. Hasta pronto.